Hey there, everybody. Carson here. Welcome to Living the Line. Sean's on a family vacation somewhere where it's snowing today. So we've got our good buddy Brandon Graham as a co-host today. And we're really excited to be speaking with artist John Mahoney, whose work I'll throw up on screen
Hey.
here real quick, whose work I'm familiar with from his Zentropa contribution to heavy metal. Hi, John. How's it going?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me. I love talking about graphic novels, and I tell my students that I was influenced by heavy metal, and they're like, "What's that?" I know that magazine from the '80s, and they're like, "Oh, let me look it up." So, it's kind of for a lot of the younger students, they don't really know what it is, but it influenced so much of what we have now with Alien and Blade Runner and all this other stuff that came from heavy metal. So it's still in the air, sort of. So
Yeah, and that's what I was hoping to get both you and Brandon to talk about on this episode, because you two represent to me, like when I'm looking at contemporary artists that give me what I want out of heavy metal. Like John, when your work came in, when Grant Morrison took over, I thought this looks like heavy metal again. And
mm,
Brandon's work and the work you did on Island, Brandon, for a long time, I thought, well, this is heavy metal. That other book, like it's all computer colored and like faded out gradients and stuff. And Island was the thing that had the vibe. So first off, I just wanted to ask both of you, what that means, that what that was about that original magazine and what you feel like the spirit of it is. And then we'll take a look at some of your guys' favorite issues.
Oh,
okay.
certainly. I mean, for me, I had an older brother who was always bringing home weird French comics and Japanese things, and heavy metal just seemed like it was at the core of that. I mean, so much of it just comes from Mobius. You discover
Mm,
Mobius's work, and I remember Michael Kaluta once saying that Mobius was an artist who teaches you how to draw just by looking at his work. Like
hmm
it's everything gets simpler and more beautiful, and you're like, if I could just draw crystal like Mobius, then everything else would be easier in art. And for me, a lot of it was just trying to find like other, like if Mobius exists, then what else is around that? And heavy metal had a great way of bringing not only it was something I really wanted to touch on to kind of cut off on what I was saying was it was not only like taking the original French metal hurlant or whatever screaming metal and translating it over here, but something that was really cool about the American one that it continued past and brought in guys like Frank Thorne and Richard Corbin that were as good as these brilliant European artists, but very American. And so it kind of gave me the idea that like, oh, there's room for my art in here too.
That's cool. That's great. I think for myself, I grew up in upstate New York, and it didn't have any artistic influence there at all. We had trees and more trees, and that was basically it. And I hate drawing trees. So the only artistic influence I had was Marvel Comics, and then when I was about 15, I found heavy metal, and I fell in love with that. And I still remember to this day, I was growing up with my grandparents, and my grandmother found an issue of Heavy Metal magazine, and she was beating me with a broomstick. And I remember thinking, just don't wrinkle it, because she was wrinkling the magazine. That's all I cared about. Just don't wrinkle it. You can
Hit
beat
me
the
all you
crap out of me.
want, but don't hurt the
Yeah, and she
magazine.
did wrinkle it, so I ended up buying another copy.
Uh,
So what I did was I had the monthly subscription. I had to wait for the mailman and sneak out, grab it, and then sneak it up to my room so she wouldn't rip it up. She would call it forno. She didn't know how to say porno. She just thought it was forno. Um,
Like it's like foreign porno.
there you go. She coined a phrase right there. So yeah, it was when I went to art school. That was really frowned upon. I mean, man, oh man, I showed it to my art teacher freshman year. He said, "What's your influences?" And I said, "Heavy Metal magazine." And he said, "What else?" And I said, "Oh, that's it." And he said, "You'll never be anybody. I don't want to talk to you again." And just shooed me off. And I was really upset. And I was like, "I don't want to be a nobody. I want to be a good artist." And he said, "Okay, well, stop looking at heavy metal and start drawing from life. Just draw from real life." And I did that for the whole 4 years in art school and stuff like that. But then after I graduated, I still kind of returned to my roots, which was my passion for the comics and animation and stuff that we weren't allowed to even talk about in art school. So, but I think it was good to get away from it too, to see the art history and where everything came from, and then go back to heavy metal and say, oh, well, all these people were influenced by the great masters, and you get a better sense of where they came from. So I think it was for the good.
Yeah, I was
So
thinking while you're saying that if you stuck with heavy metal, you would have probably realized eventually that they were pulling from life as well.
hopefully, or maybe I would have just copied from heavy metal for the rest of my life. I don't
Sure.
know.
That wouldn't be a horrible life either.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I find though that because we're both instructors, so you probably feel this as well, that like it's with how many students now come to art because of comics or animation of some sort. It's helpful to have been that kid yourself, because now you know all like the gateway drugs from, you know, whatever comic thing to the fine art stuff. Do you find that at all in your teaching?
Yeah, at least reaching out to the students and letting them express what they were excited about pre-art school, and allowing them to embrace that. Not shunning that, because that ends up being the quiet student in the corner who's probably pretty talented, and yet they've never gotten any encouragement whatsoever. So allowing them to say, no, this is cool, this is great, and play with that. But then eventually, then you start introducing the idea of expanding their scope, so they're not just looking at that one thing. Um, so yeah, so I try to bring in art from all different resources. You know, I have like all these binders behind me, so I bring binders to class, and you know, some of it's contemporary and some of it's more you know, classical, of course. So yeah, for sure.
Are there certain typical pathways you use, like when you see a kid's into this, then you're like, this is the thing I'm going to show them next?
No, there's no pathway. It's just our free flowing. Because what I always say, this is what I like. I don't expect you guys to like this stuff.
Yeah.
I can't even introduce you to what you like, but I say this, I love what I love, and I want you to love what you love. So just from example, I hope that they're more encouraged to embrace, you know, the best and the worst of art. Whatever makes you excited and happy, it's all good. So
Sounds like beautiful chaos.
Yeah, that's
yeah, it is. You know, I remember thinking, as I keep thinking about this, if I was in high school, which I hardly even showed up to high school, but if a writing teacher actually asked me what I was interested in and said, "Why don't you write about that?" That would have been that would have blown my mind. I never had a teacher ask me what I was interested in high school, grade school, nothing. I would have, how do I would have said, you know, science fiction and whatever, and I probably would have been writing pages and pages and pages. Instead, like I said, I didn't even go to high school. I did, but like 1 or 2 hours a day. Somebody asked me how many hours a week, how many hours do I study in high school? I said, oh, 3 hours. And they said, oh, that's pretty good. I said, no, 3 hours for the whole 4 years. That was it.
I went to school for
Um,
3 hours, but how much were you
yeah,
drawing during high school is the real important
I
question.
yeah, I wasn't drawing. I think I was spinning my wheels. I don't think I was just copying Marvel comics.
Okay.
You know, so and then and sneaking off to the movies. That was my favorite thing.
When did you get the first heavy metal for both of you? Do you remember the age?
Well, yeah, I have it right up here. My first one was 82, July of 82.
Okay.
So trying to think of what was around that time. Yeah,
Oh, that's one
pre-Empire
of the
Strikes
ones.
Back.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the ones we have up here. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the first issue I grabbed. Yeah, it was a local comic shop, and I was just like, what the heck is this? And a friend of mine loved ElfQuest, which I hated ElfQuest. It was like this cheesy. So he would always talk about ElfQuest, and I would talk about heavy metal. But at least we talked about art. So nothing against the people out there like ElfQuest. That's fine. But
Yeah, I was ElfQuest and heavy metal, so
you like ElfQuest?
I got copies back here.
That's classic.
I try to. ElfQuest is a funny thing because selling it to I got it when I was a kid. My mom writes science fiction, so anything that we could connect with was brought into the house. So ElfQuest was something that was much more. It's more for moms in some level.
Yeah, that's
Just to add to
amazing.
your idea that it's less cool than heavy metal.
Wow,
But I
that's
always
cool.
try to
Your
sell it
mom.
to people like you have to get over how ridiculous it is, and then there's a good story in there.
Oh, that's cool. I don't think I just a vague memory of elves, and all that.
Yeah, I think ElfQuest is not to turn this into an ElfQuest episode, but I think it was a weird place in when it was coming out. Like it was so successful at the time that there was and it was so earnest that I think that in a lot of ways it kind of was against a lot of what like the teenage boy of heavy metal thing of being like, there's so much murder and sex, and there's murder and sex in ElfQuest, but it was done so it was like you could show it to teenage girls and teenage boys.
Interesting. That's cool. So your mom was a writer. That's incredible. Or is
Yeah,
a writer.
I owe her a cover right now.
Okay. That's
She's been
amazing.
Yeah, ElfQuest is one that I've tried because you hear about it and it's so big and long, and I like the idea of these big long epics. And I always try to get into ElfQuest, but I can't do it either. I'm with you on that one, John.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to look it up again. Like I said, I haven't even looked at it since I was a teenager, but it was just I had my friend Rocco Rodi was his name, and he was into ElfQuest, and he moved to Italy, and I've been trying to find him ever since. Like 500 years later, my friend Rocco, where is he?
On an ElfQuest fan forum right now.
Exactly.
So Brandon, you look like you had your first. You look like you were about to wave your first issue
I
around.
think it might be this 1984 one with the Olivia cover.
Oh, that was later on.
It would have been, I think it was 8, which I don't like, not to put my parents on blast, but what the hell is an 8-year-old doing getting a hold of this?
How did you get a hold of that at 8?
My older brother was getting comics.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
I was the oldest, so I didn't have that benefit. I didn't see a heavy metal until I was 19 or 20. I went. It was when I went to the Kubert school for like 2 months, and just that then people had it hanging around on the magazine. So I wasn't seeing it until it was like the late 90s with like Frazado and those guys, the little elf ones. And then I had to go back and look at the history of it. So that came much later for me, it sounds like, than for you guys. I wish I had gotten a hold of those, like hiding it under the bed and running from my mom beating me. I think that like adds something to the memories of it for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think John got the severe version of that, and with me it was much more accepted in my house. So
good for you. That's awesome.
I'm looking at this, and it's got Lou Stathis as the editor of this thing, who went on to co-write a bunch of great comics with Matt Howarth in the 80s.
Very cool.
And also John Workman, who still letters comics, was I think he was the art director at one point, and he has this great, I don't know if this will show up.
I love that.
Ad.
That was one of my favorites. That blue-skinned woman.
Yeah, just these two like just wearing capes, naked, white-haired, blue-skinned ladies talking about how you subscribe to heavy metal.
He's a really good artist too, and he's only ever talked about as the letterer usually.
Yeah, it's frustrating because my friend Joe Keating had him lettering his book Shutter for a long time, and he squeezed one variant cover out of him eventually, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's too bad. So you want to jump in, John? We'll look at that first one that you picked up then in 82.
Sure.
I'll throw up a screen share and we can just go through. We'll bring back some memories.
Yeah, there you go.
This one?
Yeah. I remember staring at that cover. I still don't know quite how they did it. It looks like it's layered, maybe layers of photographs, and then the background could be live action, the sun. It's just a really cool. And you notice the funny thing about this image, if the woman's body doesn't really exist, like her robot body is being melded into the guy. If you notice, it doesn't make sense. She would never be
Yeah.
able to hug him quite like that. Uh, but yeah, the whole mechanics and everything. This is before Terminator, you know. I just love the kind of the believability of it. Um, so yeah, so the covers were really amazing to me. I still can't fathom how someone would paint something like this, but
Doing a blur, I keep thinking airbrush, but I don't know how you do a blur quite like in the lower left.
Yeah, you think
yeah,
this is photo manipulated, not just airbrush? I would have assumed airbrush or some kind of just like blending with oil paint.
yeah, maybe it looks like it could be layers of like almost like the front part of the grass looks like it was cut out, and then there's like
Yeah.
different layers. But yeah, it could be done in airbrush as well.
I see the part that you're talking about. Like right,
Yeah,
I
you
can't point
see.
at it. There's that
I
like
don't
blobby
know.
part. I have no arrow. I see what you're
But
talking about though.
yeah, but I just think it's a beautiful image, and it still influences me to this day. I have this framed, this particular image in my studio. So
Nice. Who's the artist of it?
I don't remember. I can see it says Mark
Now it says
Marketing
WARK
W.
Workington. Somebody Workington.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nice. Yeah. I wonder if that was on the Hildebrand brothers.
Pre Hildebrandt Brothers. Yeah. It kind of has that look with that
That's
like
the
double
next ad
lighting.
we're going to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are because I don't have these physically. I just got some digital versions of them because these
Yeah.
are all like $60 now if you want to get a single one of them off the internet.
Really? That's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's Blade
So this
Runner.
is probably right after Blade Runner. That's cool.
Now it's like coming to a theater near you.
Yes.
Did you guys ever read the articles? Was that ever a part of the experience for you?
Oh, very
No.
much so.
Okay, I didn't read them. It's like at two different sides.
You did, Brandon?
Yeah, well, the interviews are really fascinating. I mean, this one I have here is a John Waters interview, and one of the
John
things that
Waters.
stuck out most to me with heavy metal was the Fellini interview.
Mm.
There's a part where Fellini, they're interviewing him, and they ask him why he didn't go to Venice to film his movies when like he built Venice in a studio, and he was like, if I went to the real place, I wouldn't have been in there. So I had to build a studio to make myself in it. And I always think of that's a good analogy for how you use reference in art. Like you've got to kind of put yourself in it and not just, copy the thing.
Interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, I should have been reading the articles. John, I'm with you. I was like, just show me the comic stuff. I don't.
Well, even yeah, with my own graphic novels and Tropa, I made it wordless because that's how I kind of saw the world, I guess. So I wanted people force them to see it my way, where there's no. Well, when I was developing the comic, I started putting word bubbles in, and I immediately the inspiration stopped. Like the cement solidified in my feet, and I couldn't move forward. And then when I took the words out, I started moving forward again. So there was something about the written word that stopped me. But then once I got it out, finally, I was able to write a screenplay based on the thing, and everything kind of came together. But I needed to work through the stuff wordlessly, which is I don't know, just the way it was. I don't know.
That
I
makes
didn't
a lot of
really,
sense
yeah.
to me because your images are so, they're so alien that I almost feel like if you tried to put text on top of it, there's that real danger of it just immediately like deflating how, like, where did this come from? What is this?
Exactly. Like, what can they possibly say? It's like, Um, so, so yeah, so translating this into a movie, I had to use this as kind of like a point of departure, but it ended up turning out to be something I think much better. But this was only a point of departure. So, but yeah, then it was only me. It was like many, many, many years later. Only a few years ago, I was diagnosed dyslexic, like half the people, half the artists around. So I think that was part of it too. Is when I was reading, whenever I read, my mind would just wander. So anyway,
And you
um,
were doing Zentropa prior to, because I only got familiar with it through heavy metal, but then in looking more at your work, it looks like you were doing this earlier version of it.
right. So I did a Kickstarter, and I was talking in the Kickstarter how heavy metal influenced me. So when the Kickstarter was completed and it was successful, the people at Heavy Metal reached out to me and they had lunch, we and everything, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." But so they decided to publish parts from the book in Heavy Metal. The only thing I had to do was color it because most of it, the original book was black and white. So
Okay.
so that was cool. That helped me launch the second Kickstarter, and now we're on our way to Kickstarter number 3 in June, hopefully.
And
Nice.
that's
So I'm
for
interested, is the screenplay, are you retelling the same story from the first book?
There's hardly a story. It's very much like you just wander around. So yeah, so there's not much of a story, but so I was able to start with the world and then build a story from that. So it took me 2 years to write the screenplay, and then another 2 years to do the production design. And so now we are all going to have a screening tomorrow of the story reel. So we did a complete story reel of all the storyboards for the whole film. Took like thousands of storyboards, and yeah, so I'm kind of excited. We're gonna make little finger sandwiches and make it have a little party tomorrow. I'm pretty excited.
so it's going to be a Zentropa film that you were mentioning.
Yeah, it's gonna be a movie. It's about right now. It's running about 2 hour, a little over 2 hours. It's a
Oh,
story. It's not a psychedelic head trip. It's an actual story, and yeah, it's almost like my personal life story translated into sci-fi. Which is, I guess, everyone's story is you're taking your own personal experiences and translating them. But yeah, I'm pretty excited. We're going to be 3D printing all the main characters, and if anyone out there knows Steven Spielberg, I am looking for him, and I want to have lunch with him and hang out and tell him my story. So please pass his info along to me.
so it's going to be you're going to like animate it with the 3D printouts, or
No, no, it's going to be live action. So it's a live action film influenced by these designs.
oh, and the 3D printouts will be part of the Kickstarter.
Well, part of the presentation, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, but I'm hoping we're going to do the whole thing with no CG. So it'll be people in costume and
Oh,
stop motion miniatures. Kind of like I keep saying, as if the movie was made in 1976.
mhm.
So right before Star Wars. So no digital stuff in there. And I think it could be cool. It would feel new, even though it's old, because kids don't really see stop motion in movies anymore, like they did with, I don't know, like Empire Strikes Back and Dragon Slayer. That was the last of it, and then it went into the other stuff. But but yeah, I want to not only bring it back, I just like it. I want to work at a studio where I can see people hunched over at puppets. That warms my heart. And I do a lot of digital stuff, but it's just not the same going into a room with a bunch of computers. It just doesn't have the same joy. And I think part of movie making is enjoying the process as well as the end product.
Oh yeah.
So maybe it's a selfish way of making a movie, but
Well, it reminds me of a story I heard. I think it was for one of the Star Wars movies where uh, they asked one of the guys like where he came up with the designs for a spaceship, and he talked about how he's biking to the studio and he just saw some junk by the side of the road and he grabbed it and put it in his bag and brought it with him and then built the thing out of it. And I was like, you don't really get that if you're just like going through Google being like, what should a spaceship look like? It's like you need to be really hands-on about art and kind of engaging with the whole world around you. And that's the thing with digital art, is it allows you to not have to.
Yeah, and I think finding bits and pieces force the design in certain directions, and you kind of pull it from the real world. And I think that's kind of where Star Wars came from. And now you can make anything in the computer. There's too much freedom. So I like the idea of forcing us to reach back into the junk pile, basically, and finding stuff that way. So
when your work in Zentropa felt collage-like to me, it looked like digital collage. I'm not sure, because when I see the earlier stuff, it looks like pen and ink drawings. But
actually, there is no ink in Zentropa.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say, everything was built in 3D.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I was doing is emulating my ink drawings in ZBrush. So yeah, basically it's called Toon Shading. It's been around forever. So I was really nervous. Like, I wanted to get this book out because everyone's going to do Toon Shading. It's going to be everywhere. And I was really stressing out, and I finally got the Kickstarter done, and no one's doing it. But I think the trick is, if you sculpt something that's already weird, and then you make a toon shade out of it, it'll feel like a drawing. But if you just take something normal and you make it into a toon shade, then it feels like just a cheap app. It doesn't feel. So you have to create the thing first that feels like a drawing, even though it's a sculpture, and then turn it around.
Well, and it looks like you reuse the same thing oftentimes, which is where you start to get that collage look.
That's because I'm incredibly lazy. Yes, you
know
that.
No,
but
like
the same damn thing.
You're the only human on Earth that would describe your work as lazy. You have power to sitting around smoking stogies and not getting any work done.
But yeah, it's that repetition of just. Almost like that painting Nude Descending the Staircase. Have you seen that? Where it's like this repetition, or like cubism or futurism. But I like that. I like that.
And the repetition at different scales was something that just like really lasted with me in your work.
Oh, thank you. I love scale. That's so much fun. And that's something you can play with in the computer. You can go crazy with scale. That's so easy and fun to do. So, but also shape. You want large versus tiny. What I mean? It doesn't look like, I always say, like a pile of pots and pans. So if you have something really big and then something tiny, it's not so junky that's just like, ugh, I don't want to look at it. Hopefully that's the idea.
So. Yeah, I've been doing that. I noticed I've been doing that a lot in Photoshop. When I start to color work, is I'll just shrink down characters and make other things bigger, and then leave the art alone aside from that.
I love that. Yeah, that's so fun. There was a scene in a movie called American Pop. You ever seen that? The Ralph Bakshi.
Oh yeah.
There was some scene where it was the end of the movie, had this collage of different parts of the movie. You'd see a big face and tiny little characters animated in front of the face. And I remember loving that. That was one of the movies that got me into animation, was American Pop. It's all rotoscoped, Ralph Bakshi, but that use of scale was it's just that one moment, but it influenced everything I do. So.
And in the digital construction, are there collage elements where it is kind of like what Brandon's saying, where you're just grabbing someone else that I think of sometimes when I look at your work is like Phil Hale, and he'll do that. It'll be like part of a typewriter and then part of something else.
Work. Yeah.
And then it looks like he's constructing stuff together out of them in his photo collage. Is there an element to that in your 3D work, or are you entirely creating all of the shapes and then collaging from there?
Some stuff, I'm trying to remember what's in there. Yeah, sometimes I'll take a specific, I can't think of anything specific, like a wheel of a tank that I didn't build the wheel, but I'll take that and I'll integrate that into some monstrous thing. So it is collage. A lot of it is collage. Yeah, for sure.
And Brandon, you made a first episode to a TV show, right? And you guys
Yeah,
did a lot of like physical building in there.
yeah, I designed a so yeah, no one's ever seen it. I'm not even sure if I've sent it to you. Have I sent it to you, Carson?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if it's good or not. It's a weird thing to describe. I got hired working on porn sets, like porn parody movies, this company called Wood Rocket. And after working on a couple, we did a John Wank, of course, and like a Dragon Boob Z or something, all these ridiculous things. I talked the director friend of mine uh, into basically like, can we get some money and just make a sci-fi pilot? And we made it. We built a spaceship.
Wow, that's
We
cool.
hired this guy Tom, who does all the Evil Bong, the art film Evil Bong. He does all the props for that. So we brought him in to do the alien stuff, and we just filmed the whole thing in 2 days and edited it together, and have never shown anyone. But
You got to show it right now. Now it's the debut.
I
All right,
should,
now
yeah,
let's
yeah.
play the film.
I wish I
Roll 'em.
had it pulled up in my email.
Like, this is your life. Here's what you spent a while doing. Yeah, but it was an interesting process, because I was thinking about, that's my low budget version of thinking about how you translate your comic into film. Must be like such a huge process, because it seems like getting the feeling in another medium. I mean, I guess you have to let go of some stuff and let it be whatever the medium is.
Oh yeah, it's beyond overwhelming, and a lot of stuff doesn't work in live action. So a lot of stuff, like some of the crazy costumes, it would look ridiculous in real life, and people couldn't walk around comfortably. So a lot of stuff had to be stripped down. And I think that's important, that the characters feel comfortable in the film. Otherwise, I'm not going to mention any films here, but sometimes there's some overly done costumes. The character can't even turn their head. It's like,
Sure.
what's the point? I don't care how good the costume looks. So yeah, so getting rid of all that, it's almost like shedding all of this excess that doesn't work in movement, doesn't even work in animation, much less live action. So yeah, so that's part of it. And then just getting a story that people care about. That was always, I've done abstract films ever since I graduated college, and I always give this advice to young people, students, anyone interested in film: don't do that. Tell a story. Tell a story with a beginning, middle, and an end that gives people a chance to feel something. I got fixated with abstract films because I was studying George Lucas, and he did abstract films, but he only did them for a short amount of time, and then he did his narrative films, which were much more successful. And I should have realized that and said, okay, stop with the abstraction, start telling stories. But I think the reason is, for better or worse, I just wanted to develop my artwork, and I got fixated on that. Maybe too long, I don't know. But so the past couple of years, I said, what do you want to have etched on your tombstone? Do you want to be artist, art teacher, or filmmaker? And once I realized that, I took all of my clay, all my sculpture, all my drawing supplies, and just put them away. And I had a blank table with a blank sheet of paper, and I started just chipping away at the screenplay, because there's you can enjoy certain things, but what do you really want to do with your life? It's, and if those two are not in sync, then the time is ticking, when it comes to how much time we have on this, on this planet. So I made the decision. And it was the best decision, I think. Even if the film never gets made and the screening tomorrow is a complete disaster and they throw tomatoes at the screen, I enjoy the film. I love the movie, and I can feel happy, even if I have to etch it on my own tombstone before I die. Filmmaker.
Your hand sticking out of the grave.
I will be graffitiing my own, but I feel like I've taken my art, or whatever you call it, my creativity, to a much higher level by forcing myself into this uncomfortable place. And screenplays are hard.
Yeah.
You watch these movies, oh, they're all terrible. It's like, it's hard. It's hard to write a story. And then if you have executives and people telling you, and actors that want different things, and you put it together, and it starts off as a great idea and ends up not. it's amazing that anything comes out great. That it's just there's so many variables that can pull it down. It's just unbelievable.
But yeah, that's always been my argument for comics is you can put all the mistakes on one person if you want and not have to. but I do think that's a really good point about kind of if you're not enjoying the process of what you're doing, or the process of what you're doing has to be what's worth all your time, because anything else is just, it's like there's so much in comics that if you're not enjoying sitting at a desk wiggling a pencil, then it's really not the job for you.
Yeah, exactly. If you're focused on it's going to be the bestseller, and if it isn't, then was all that time a waste?
Mhm.
And that's a good thing to question ourselves. Like are we doing the right thing at the right time? Whatever. So.
Well, and the age, hitting that age, like I just hit that. I just turned 40, and me and Sean recorded some episode where we were like drawing some Sam Keith stuff, and I thought I'd love to do a whole book that has this much texture as Sam Keith. And then I like compared that to like the 5 other things I would like to do, and I said I literally don't have enough time in my life anymore to do a book that intense, plus a book as intense as the other thing. And yeah, that was a new pressure on me to like, yeah, how do you prioritize? I think it's easy to overlook that when you're younger. Like you've got forever to do all the projects.
Well, yeah, I came up with a theory. You can actually expand time. And I was going to write a book about this. So let's say you don't have enough time. You can actually expand time. Um, it's like when you were a kid in grade school and you stared at the clock, and it's like half an hour before you can leave, and that half an hour felt like 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you're aware of the clock and you stare at the clock all the time, you can actually slow down time. So let's say I have 5 minutes here, I can spend it on my comic, where you start really being aware of your time. If I wake up an hour early every day, that's 7 hours a week. So if you're really aware of your time, you can do that amazing comic and the other comic and the other thing, as long as you're very aware of every minute that you're spending, and you start harnessing these little bits of time. So that's unless you only have 3 hours to live, which you don't. You can do a lot. You can do a lot.
Yeah.
So I do that a lot. I would time myself. I would time how long it takes to do the laundry, to clean the house, and I would reduce it down. And I would reduce it, and I would expand. That's how I was able to do the Zentropa comic, and now the feature, and other things too. Like I had to cut out other things, like there's no TV, you can't watch TV, you can't play video games. So certain things are reduced and certain things are expanded. So
I was better at that when I was single, but now it's
you
like
can still do it. I'm telling you.
yeah, but they start adding in other things. It's like okay.
Yeah.
Like I try and reduce,
like
but it looks ugly. The way I reduce looks ugly. So you need to have the thing that looks nicer in the house, but it adds like 5 seconds to every dish that you wash. It's like, oh my God.
Yes, exactly.
It's a battle.
Yeah, but there's something just about being conscious of what you're doing, because I often think about how in repetition, your brain, if you do the same thing every day, there's no point in even retaining that information. So sometimes it's just about being conscious and being like, like something great about making art is it's really rare that I see a drawing I've done where I can't remember exactly where I was and what was going on in my life when I did that. Where it's like, there's so many movies or whatever that you see where like, I saw this, I don't remember when I saw it, it's not important.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of consciously like, holding on to whatever moments of life we have is really fun.
And John, there's a physical theory. I think we're go way off track, but this is how we roll here, anyways. Behind that perception of time, I read it recently that as you get older, time seems to speed up because your eyes move less, and that they've tied the saccadic motion of your eye like has an internal unit built into it. So like every time you move your eye, your brain will count off as like that unit of time. So as your eye starts to move less, your brain starts thinking, well, there was less portions of time going by. And so you're like constant glancing at the clock might actually be like expanding your sense of time in a like neurological sense.
Yeah, and I think once you're aware of that and you realize that that's only perception, doesn't really affect our natural world, then we can manipulate that and say, oh, we're thinking about that because we're older, but we can start thinking as if we were younger. And we can, I say it all the time. I have, students who are, oh, I don't have time, I can't do my homework, I don't have time. It's like, well, let's just think about it. Let's just lay out your day, lay out your hours. When I was teaching, for myself, I guess I'm a little bit of a workaholic, but I would always work during lunch. So during lunch breaks, I would take out my sculpture and I'd have my sandwich and I would be sculpting or whatever. And all of my entire portfolio of sculpture work was basically during lunch, during my lunch breaks. I so anyway, so that was something I remember working at the studios. I felt that too, animation studios where people would play ping pong during lunch, which I think is great and it's fun. But I would go to figure drawing class. They always had figure drawing class, and I was always building my portfolio. And it was like they're like, "You have a job. Why worry about your portfolio? Everything's fine." I'm like, I don't know. I don't think animation is going in a good direction. I think it's all going to go downhill. I think we should all double down on our portfolios. And they'd be like, "Oh, John, why are you always that way?" But I felt that I felt that I wanted to harness that time. Maybe it's just enjoying, but I think that you can get a lot done if you're conscious. I say that because I need to become more conscious of exercise. I don't get any exercise, so I'm terrible at exercise. And I say to myself, well, I don't have time to exercise. It's like, okay, John, come on now. You're the expanding time guy. You should be able to make time to exercise. So I have to do that, but you have to be conscious. You have to be conscious of the fact that you're not exercising. And yeah, you can scrape together 20 minutes a day,
Yeah.
but you have to be conscious of it. So anyway.
Was your schooling, you were talking about schooling, was that in film or like illustration, fine art?
I wish I went to film, but I went to school for illustration, Pratt Institute in
Okay.
Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
I just really wanted to draw really well, and I thought that illustration was the strongest part of our school. I think even more than a drawing major. And then when I graduated, or started to get towards graduation, I started realizing I hate illustration. I hate working for art directors.
It's very relatable.
I did some freelance work and it kind of like scarred me. So I decided I want to get into film. I was like, I can't ask my grandparents to send me back to film school. There's no way. So I thought that getting into Disney would be halfway between art and film. I thought so. I focused on banging on Disney's door for a while and ended up working for them for a while as a kind of concept artist. So it wasn't really film though. I should have doubled down and really focused on live action, which is my passion. But I just kind of got backed into animation and I was there for forever. Um, so I do think what I've learned I could apply to creatures and puppets and things, but I feel like I was kind of next door to where I really was supposed to be for many many years, if that makes any sense.
Well,
So
that's what I wanted to ask, because you were talking about, you seem to have a real good awareness of how your designs will scale up into somebody wearing them, and how much experience you've had, as a concept designer doing that kind of stuff where those things, rather than someone who hasn't seen their stuff scaled up and have to be worn, or if that's just something that you've noticed throughout watching films. And
yeah, well, studying like the Stan Winston, video, not videos, but the artist, and working for Stan Winston School for a little bit, and building. I'm sculpting constantly, so I just love the idea of live action. You can set the camera up, you have an actor, so you're releasing yourself. You're not puppeteering them. You're letting them bring something wonderful to the table, which is kind of like teaching in a class. You don't force the students to do something. You
yeah,
give them a prompt, and then there's like this wonderful improvisation of just creative flow of ideas. And I see that, I see live action as that. Animation, you're doing it one frame at a time. You're forcing every single frame to be a certain thing, and that's wonderful, but it's not for me. It's
I,
not
I have
for
a
me.
I have an interesting I have a similar thing where I actually have a hard time watching a lot of animation because I get so in my head about the process and it takes all the fun out of it for me. Where
Right.
where
Exactly.
comics or live action, it's not, I don't have that experience at all. But you know,
Right.
with like I'll watch a modern cartoon, I'll just be thinking like, I bet this was storyboarded in this country, made in this country, and it's so weird to me that the person who designed these characters probably never met the person that drew the line that you're seeing on the screen now, and it's painted like cell shading, but it's all computers. And I don't know why it's like the least fun. And because I draw comics, people are constantly sending me animation, and I sound like such a dick because I'm always like, I don't like it. I don't want to watch it.
Yeah, I feel like there are a few things that I really, really like, but most of it, 99.9% of it is going to be live action.
Sure.
It's
I do enjoy the 70s, 80s stuff just because of the process where I think everything's photographed. It makes it more fun for me. But yeah, live action is I'm interested, John, what some of your kind of go-to films are that inspire you in the way that heavy metal did.
Well, I mean the obvious like Star Wars and Alien, but I also love Taxi Driver. I really hated that movie when I saw it as a kid. I thought it was a very kind of racist, angry film.
Sure.
Then living in New York City, you can kind of agree with what you have
That guy's got a point.
So wait a minute, I kind of but yeah, I like most of Scorsese's stuff. The Graduate, I'm almost like obvious films, I guess. An Officer and a Gentleman. It's one of the movies I watch like 100 times. I'm working on my film, like these relationship type of stuff. Usually, I don't like science fiction unless I either love it or I hate it. Most of the time, I hate it. But I love Fury Road. I saw that like 12 times in the theater. Like that, I just couldn't. I could say I could just take the DVD out and put it between bread, just eat it. It's so good. But yeah, I kind of more attracted to kind of more relationship type of stuff. Like there was a show, not a movie, but it was called I think it's called The Mayor of Eastwick. It was like
yeah,
what's her name? It was the girl from Titanic.
Kate Winslet.
Kate Winslet. It was
Yeah.
She did a television show that was just heart wrenching, and it was so tactile. You don't even want to see. It's so brutal, but you can't help watching it. But it was so. I remember feeling like this small as a film director. Oh, you want to direct? Look at this. It's like you feel like just giving up. But at the same time, it's so inspiring to see such amazing work being done. So yeah. So I have that. I guess the typical like Rocky. I love like those type of underdog movies. Grease. What was that?
Oh, those Rocky movies are great. I keep being, I'm so amazed whenever they do like the new Creed movies are as good as the Rocky ones, I think.
I think the original Creed especially was really good. Yeah. Amazing.
Even like the later Rocky where they really address him being kind of like Adrian being gone and him like having to deal with being older. It's
I was crying my eyes out.
Yeah, you don't expect like
Adrian's dead.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so sad.
And it's amazing when you don't really expect like, oh, the fifth sequel to this movie is still really good, where you expect like a Freddy versus Jason quality as movies keep getting made.
Exactly. That was independent film. He couldn't get that made. It was such a strange, odd choice for a Rocky film. So he had to do it on his own. But yeah. So yeah. But I don't like those weird science fiction films. People send me, oh, you would like this. This is your type of thing. And I'm like, just rolling my eyes, like, please, just end it now.
It's like too close to home, right? When it's something so close to what you do, it's so much easier to be critical and see the flaws.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if a story and the characters are just poorly done, I don't really, I can't really buy into the fancy because all films look great nowadays. The productions, they all look great. So it's the story and the characters, if it's believable or not, you know. So it's easier to pick like a drama where you have to tell a great story. Where with science fiction and fantasy, you have all these bells and whistles to kind of put a big set dressing in front of it, and that'll pack people into the theaters. But with a drama, you have to have something besides. You have to have something to
Hmm.
draw people in. So I think dramas, percentage wise, I kind of gravitate towards more than the sci-fi, even though I want to do sci-fi. It's weird.
That makes sense because I mean it's back to the Fellini quote I was talking about of putting yourself in it. I think there's an advantage of drawing or creating things that show more how you feel than reality does. So
Right,
it's more of like this is my version, but then you get that base level of authenticity through the emotional connection with the characters and actual plot.
right, exactly. Another thing too, interesting. You mentioned Fellini. I had this idea like last week. I was like, I was watching some of. I don't really know Fellini's films very well, so I'm starting to watch them now. And I was watching the movie Eight and a Half
Oh yeah.
recently, and it's so much going on. There's so many wonderful ideas. I'd have to stop the movie and kind of digest it. But what I would do is watch it as the very last thing before I go to sleep, and I would have images of these Fellini scenes in my head. And I'm thinking, what a great thing to do as a artist or filmmaker is study something that's really heavy right before you sleep,
Hmm.
and then you're processing it. So you're actually working. That's probably why I can't sleep very well at night. But we're working while you sleep. You know that so you can actually take your sleep time and apply that to what you want to learn
Oh,
by
that's
by
fascinating.
yeah by really focusing on that because I need Fellini. I don't need another Star Wars. You know, I need the really good, solid filmmaking of the past. And if I can't digest it in one viewing, I can at least sleep on it. You know what I mean? So I've been doing that for the past week. I have a whole series of classic films,
Oh,
and
nice.
I'll watch a chunk of it. And you, whatever the last thing that you experience right before you go to sleep, that's what runs through your head,
Hmm.
like it or not. So,
I've been reading a book, a David Lynch book. I think it was about meditation, but he's got all these things in it about film in it. He actually mentions Fellini at one point. I think he visited him on his deathbed.
yes,
Um,
yeah, David Lynch is another one of my heroes. Yeah,
yeah, he's fantastic. So I was thinking about him in connection to Fellini, where a lot of both of their ideas, they feel like they came up with this very raw idea for a scene and cobbled a bunch of scenes together to make a movie rather than taking standard plot structures. And I've been trying to almost convince myself to do more of that. Just like come up with a weird scene and draw it as opposed to, and then build a story around it as opposed to the other direction I've been used to.
but what would the other direction be? Like, how do you normally construct a
Oh,
story?
just much more like character situation and then building the world around that. Um, yeah, I'm envious of just like, I mean, both Lynch and Mobius, they have these way of describing stuff that I almost don't believe because they'll be like, I sat down with a piece of paper and then in a trance I looked up and had drawn 20 pages.
Mm.
It's like maybe you forgot it, but there's certainly the work that went into it.
Well, I mean, I kind of work kind of like that, you know, for drawing. Uh, you know, so I don't have, like you mentioned before, I don't really have memory of the drawings that I do. There's no memory at all. It's like not that I'm in a trance or anything,
Sure.
but I what I do in my drawing class is an exercise. I have the students not think about drawing. Like, you have to think about something else.
Huh.
I want you to go to the theater and look at the last movie that you saw and run through the movie while you're drawing. And you started to get into this like doodling, you know, type of a vibe. And I'll actually call out students. I'll be like, hey, you over there, you're thinking. I can tell by the way you're sitting. I can tell by what you're doing. You're thinking and you're not feeling. And I try to. That's the one thing in my class you're not allowed to think. And I'll go around the room, and if anyone's thinking, I'll call them out on that. And I think Mobius did works that way, and I definitely David Lynch seems to work that way. But it's not. I think when you're thinking of drawing, you're forcing your line, you know.
That makes sense.
So
There's a certain element of lying to yourself when you're drawing. I often think about how when I'm drawing some big perspective drawing and I'm doing like mountains in the distance, I've convinced myself that I'm like reaching my hand way into the drawing to do these
that's
things,
cool.
and I'm like drawing closer when things are closer. And it's like you have to lie to get the picture done.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But
So
John, it sounds like you're trying to force them outside of conscious interaction and get it to be sublimated and like the system takes over a little bit.
yeah, well, kind of encourage. I wish I could force them, but you can't really.
Till the
But
school lets peyote in.
yeah, but I think the funny thing they say is usually my class they call it like the yoga class, where they just relax. I kind of took that as a compliment, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for myself, I tried to draw when I was younger, and I tried so hard, and I after a while, I just gave up. I was like, this is ridiculous. What am I doing? You know. And then when I got hired at Disney, I finally stopped trying, and I just started having fun in drawing class during my lunch breaks. I would take twigs and gluing them together, and all kinds of things that a little kid would do. And that's when my work started to breathe, and I started to draw better because I wasn't trying, you know. So, so having young people work that way, I mean, it's incredible. Like 17-year-olds, and you plant that seed in their brain, and by the time they're 18, they can draw better than I can. It's like, in a way, it's kind of cool. But then you feel jealous of them, like, damn you, no, you're not supposed to be that good. But they get incredible because you just let it flow. Um, all the stuff that you learned is still there, but it's way in the back of your head.
Hmm.
And what you're thinking of, it's like knitting a sweater. If you're thinking about every single stitch, you're going to rip the sweater up into pieces. You know, you're going to be frustrated. But if you just get into the zone, you know, where you're just kind of noodling away. Anyway, I feel like I'm I'm talking too much about my side of things. Just one
Oh, that's
opinion of
fascinating.
many.
No, it's interesting though. Like, because I want to steal, like
Oh
as a
yeah,
teacher
yeah. We'll have a
myself. Like,
little.
what are some of the strategies you use to get them there? I mean, I know you said you go around and you see it, but
Well, first thing I say is stop. You don't think about drawing, but I give them something to think about, or I'll tell stories in class. You know, can I think of any stories? Like it could be something as simple as you have to get my car fixed, and you know the transmission costs X amount of dollars, or I can buy a new car, you know, but then I have to rent a car in order to have some kind of way to move around until I get the other car. So you're thinking about this problem that you have in your life that needs to be figured out, and you focus on that. Could be a problem or it could be a pleasant memory, and you focus on that 100%, and you're just your hand is just moving. And I think it's the same way with acting. You can't tell an actor, be sad.
Mhm.
I want you to be angry. You have to get them into the scene and then forget about the words on the page, the script, and you're just kind of in the mood or in the feeling for it. And that's when the best artwork comes. It's
Hmm.
amazing. Sometimes you look at people's work. Again, I feel like you push the students to a certain distance, and then I get jealous. I'm like, damn it, you got to. It's like that's too good. I got to tell you something bad to keep you down. But I never do that. But
yeah,
When
it's
they're doing this,
tempting
are they
though.
drawing? Are they doing? Is there a specific thing they're drawing, or like are they drawing from life, or is it just kind of out of their head while not thinking about it?
usually it's drawn from the model. We have figure models, costume models, or we'll have two or three illustrators, and you're mixing illustration together.
No,
You
that's
might be
cool.
looking at James Jean, mixing it with Mobius, and looking at the figure model at the same time, sort of. Or
Nice.
you'll start with the model, like I'll say, I want you to draw the body of the figure and leave the head empty. And then I want you to look at the reference and see what happens. You know, literally just see what happens. Um, and yeah, there's this tremendous level of a competency because you're not really conscious about how good you are as an artist. It doesn't matter anymore. We're all doodling, we're all hanging out. And sometimes you go in these weird directions, like what Mobius does. All of a sudden he'll do this really weird thing that wasn't conscious. It was just him kind of goofing around. He just went for it. There is how to draw and how to structure and all that type of stuff, but I think you get that in other classes. You don't need that in my class, that's for sure. So I don't even talk about that. I feel like I'm outnumbered when it comes to how to draw. There's like 1,000 to 1. Everyone's talking about here's how you do it, and I'm like, okay, you've got that.
Mhm.
What about the other side? What about just skating? Just like if you're on the dance floor and you're aware of every movement that you're making, you're not going to be a good dancer. Right?
Right. You don't want to have to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 the entire time and not have.
Exactly. You're not
I
going
went
to
through a
pick up
period
any
where I
girls
was
that
reading
way.
and watching a bunch of videos on plot and scripting and everything, and it just made writing harder. It did not help.
Exactly. It's not supposed to be that way.
Mhm.
I had to put away all of my Robert McKee books to write this script. I love him. I think he's amazing. He's a genius, but I don't want to have him yelling in my ear, "You're not good enough," every time I put a word down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Robert. So and all the other books. I think there's amazing art and amazing writing that can come from people who have no how-to books in their library.
So, yeah, something I get a lot out of how-to books, especially like comic how-to books, is I'll read them almost with the idea of how am I going to disagree with this, and
That's the only way
Yeah.
to read those.
yeah, especially I mean it's great when you read a Will Eisner book and you're like I disagree with him about this, and it's like who the hell do I think I am? But it's fun.
Yeah, I wonder what David Lynch, if he was to write a how to write comics. We kind of already know what he would say,
Sure.
but having that type of book available to students that would be wonderful to say, okay, I'm not really feeling this. I'm not really feeling the how to. Is there any other things out there? Oh, let me try the Lynch book. Oh, that so you have these other options, but usually education, it's kind of focused only on the logical side of the brain, even in art. So
Yeah, and it seems like balancing the contrast between like managing every minute of your day to do the right things while also having fun and being totally free and playing in art seems like such an amazing balancing act.
well, hopefully if you can blend the two, so you're having fun like all the time.
Sure.
I always say if I go to hang out at the beach, I just get stressed. I'm just like sitting there staring at the water, But if I'm making a sandcastle, or if I'm doing something, maybe again, workaholic, I don't know, but I need to be doing something to make it fun for me. And if you can incorporate that into everything you do, like for instance, when I drive to work, drive to USC, it takes an hour and a half because of traffic. But I listen to movies. I have a DVD player, and I always play movies while I'm driving, and it makes it fun. I get little snacks. I got a little drink going. Otherwise, they're gonna have road rage,
I got snack packs.
Yeah, exactly.
You call it a
Snack packs.
workaholic because you're not trying to monetize all the things you're doing, which is something that I really struggle with. Is my brain got so trained to like, oh, if I'm going to do this, there has to be a financial thing, or it has to like gain an audience or something. And in recent years, it's been really nice to just like live more privately and be like, I'm having fun and I'm making something that's artistic and no one needs to know about it, which seems like something you're able to do.
Yeah, I think getting more followers and making more money is supposed to make life more fun and make you more happy. But if you can find that happiness right away and skip all of that just by doing the work, then like, hey, wait a minute, I found it, So yeah, I think that journey. I think I found a lot of that, and now I want to just share it with as many people as I can. My goal is hopefully, if the film works and I get to make this thing, to travel around the world and talk about this stuff. Not talk about the film, but use that as a platform to talk about how creative people can find joy by just thinking these ways, by kind of turning things upside down a little bit, or utilizing your time to find more joy, and also if you're joyful about what you want to do, you're also learning about what you need to do, and it becomes financial. That helps later on too. Like all the other benefits come along with that. But I think it starts with that sense of uh, allowing yourself to experience the joy without feeling guilty or awkward or no one's gonna like this, but I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But having someone out there to say, no, no, that's good, or maybe it's not good, but it will become good if you keep putting the time into it.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Hopefully it caught what you guys were saying. But if
yeah,
there's a gap in the episode, everyone, I'm sorry. I'm the one recording and my internet crashed out for a second. So you guys were
yeah,
talking about James Jean when I came back in. Uh,
yeah. Just how much I admired him, and that Brandon worked with him a little bit, which is pretty cool. Yeah, he's one of my heroes for sure. And he's always doing something different too. He's one of the few artists that continually surprises me.
mhm.
Like I can't think of that many that are just still like, oh wow, that's different. I didn't think that they. I can't like no, as I can't imagine what he's going to do next.
Yeah, he's managed to
You know?
not, I guess partially through success, is he's managed to not fall into any niches. Like he'll jump into fine art and then just be like, oh, he did a ad for Target or something. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. So very inspiring.
Yeah, the arc from him, I remember when he was doing the first time I was aware was on the covers for Fables. And
Yes.
like he was killing it on that. And it's like, this guy's great. And yeah, you were talking about his sketchbooks. And like I remember obsessively looking, he would post them on the internet like every year, I think, and obsessively looking at those. And then
Oh
to
yeah,
where he's at now, like with these huge acrylic paintings and all of these 3D printed
Girls. Yeah.
embossed things, it's amazing the arc his career has taken.
certainly. Yeah, I was telling John that I knew him when he was in SVA. I knew he was great, but I really preferred his sketchbooks to his final work, and just kind of this process of my ego getting killed in relation to seeing how good he is.
Hmm.
And we were working on a Pepsi commercial together, and just seeing him like do these painted backgrounds, and how much I was just like, oh wow, this guy's amazing.
That's incredible. And he
Well,
he actually did work in heavy metal, which is really cool. They
Oh
finally
yeah, he
brought
did a
James
cover, I
Jean.
think.
Yeah,
oh,
I did
did
some
he?
rabbits
Hmm.
fooling around. It was amazing.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah, I remember
they
that
were
one.
they had a certain period of time a few years ago when they were pulling in just all different artists. It was like a new renaissance for heavy metal, which was great. Um,
Was that
so
during the Morrison run?
yeah.
There was a weird thing because I was editing this Island magazine over at Image Comics while that was happening, and I had such a I had all these theories on what a Morrison run heavy metal would be like, and none of them quite happened, but it was almost one of those things where the excitement about it was bigger for me than the reality, even though there was some good stuff in
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder. I know they were talking about doing the heavy metal movie
Mm.
for a while. And I guess I'm not sure if I'm right, but I guess the Love Death Robots kind of became replaced, whatever.
I've heard the same
But
story, so I think it's probably true.
yeah, but it would be great if they were to do the heavy metal movie. Like when I was a kid going through the magazine, I pictured this animated. I don't think they've ever been able to do that,
Not quite,
but
because
I
the
think
original heavy metal movie is very frustrating because it's like there's no Mobius in it, and you can't have heavy metal without Mobius.
yeah, yeah, and they had some video games that they made recently that were based on Mobius's art, which kind of looks pretty cool. So I think it is possible to take Mobius and bring it into the moving image. But there's so much art in heavy metal that we could animate now, like
Sure.
technically, it doesn't. I don't know. I wish that could be. Maybe I'm sure it'll happen someday. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but but
Are
it'd be
Yeah,
great to see
definitely.
the magazine.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but the guy Ranks, what's his name? Ranks
oh the
Liberator,
Liberatory?
Yeah.
Liberatore.
Yeah.
That they were talking about making that into a feature for a while.
That could be an
That
interesting live action. That's a weird one. Have you read interviews with him ever?
No, I haven't. I know he's got to be a tense guy.
He's fascinating. I read it, maybe I have it here. Yeah,
Brendan, you always have the most amazing things, just like
I just
every
read
time.
it
Yeah, always.
under my desk. Remember Cheval Noir?
Yeah, I do.
This was like Dark Horse doing their heavy metal magazine almost.
No, I don't remember that
Great Dave
one.
Stevens cover.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, but there's an interview in here that I almost felt like Liberadorio was being baited by the interviewer, and they keep asking him about the sexy ladies he draws, and he keeps like shooting them down in really funny ways.
I associate him with like the hyper masculine. The Ranks guy is just like fucking testosterone all over the place.
Right.
Yeah, the intense kind of violence that they have.
Yeah.
But they have his book. It just came out. No, I ordered it, but it's pre-ordered. But they're going to have the series that he did from that in hardcover finally after all these years. But anyway, yeah, something like that. It almost would be too brutal in a way. But who knows? You know, with what they're doing on cable TV with the adult animation, that was a big thing. Like last year, I'm not sure if I think it just kind of deflated already. But there was the biggest thing. Everyone was trying to do adult animation stuff and projects like maybe 6 months ago. I'm not sure if it happened or not. Maybe it kind of fell through.
Show Invincible's pretty successful, right? Based off Kirkman stuff, and that's like hyper violent. And they're doing The Boys at Amazon. I think Amazon's doing it all.
Like adult animation for me, it just feels like it's like that's what the teenagers really want, which is maybe that's what heavy metal is.
Yeah, I think it usually just doesn't correspond with a really good story, you know. So it kind of, you always have to have a really good story to draw people in, or with whatever genre, or it's just gonna kind of fizzle, you know. So
were you thinking that a good heavy metal like animation would like try and like animate the styles of the famous artists? It sounds like that.
Yes,
what you were talking about,
match the style, like Corbin, like 100%, but moving. How cool that!
Wait, have you seen Corbin's movies he made?
No, I haven't.
I think you can find them on YouTube. They're really bizarre. They're all kind of different versions of Den that he. I think
I'm writing it down. So is it animated, or how is it?
He did. So they're basically live action, and then when they'll go into the kind of Den world, I remember one of them, he did this almost like shadow outline of the characters. It almost looked like he rotoscoped some stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, but they look like they're made by like him and 6 friends.
Yeah.
Like in 1978 or something. But I mean, I'm definitely I definitely hold the line, and that I do think that comic books for me are the final evolution, and I don't need. It's funny, even a movie like Sin City that I really enjoyed, I like it a lot because it reminds me how much I liked the Frank Miller comics originally reading them.
I see. So you like the fact that it stays like in its proper kind of like place in the comic.
Yeah, I think part of it is like I have a horrible thing. I have a friend who's very into film, and he hates how I regard film because I almost think of it as like this is the thing I'm going to waste my time watching, you know, unless I'm like Fellini or Lynch or things that I've decided are higher level. But I'm like novels and comics, that's the real stuff to me.
That's
which
great.
is probably just bias for, you know, what I personally do rather than any weight on the art form.
Well, I think that's good. I think we all should have a certain bias where we love a certain thing. You know, some people will go to the theater just to see the costumes because they're a costume designer or a storyboard artist or a sculptor, you know. So I think that's a good thing. That's you know what you like and you know what you're focused on. I think that's great.
Yeah,
I do agree.
There would be some gains and losses in taking something and translating to another medium. Like you're talking about costumes.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know that I'd want to see the heavy metal just like style for style. That would be weird, because I agree with both of you that animation like is like I love reading comics and I love watching film, but Brandon, you would put your finger on something I'd never figured out of, and it goes back to a lot of the other things that you guys were talking about, is something about animation. Same thing, people be like, you love comics, here, look at this, and I'm always like, no, I don't like animation, and I've never been able to explain why, but I think you're right. And then a lot of what we're talking about is that room for a little bit of chaos. And you're right, there's not that. And then for thinking about a heavy metal one, if you go to like, let's 3D animate and try and get it to look exactly like Richard Corbin's style, that's going to be like so stiff that I just don't think it would be enjoyable. Whereas that Love, Death, Robots, the first season, the second season I didn't like, but it had all of the stylistic variation of a heavy metal where it was like, wow, that's different, and I could like pick and choose the ones I liked, and it felt like it had that freshness.
Robert Valley is in those, and he's definitely a guy that like feels best suited for animation. Like,
who was it?
You know Robert Valley's work?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I love Robert Valley. Yeah. Well, maybe what you're talking about is the conversation between the viewer and the comic, where you imagine the movements. You know, you have once you animate it or once you lay it out, that part is taken away. I think that's that enjoyment of allowing, like reading a novel as opposed to seeing the movie.
Sure.
You know, there's a certain some novels shouldn't be movies. Is that kind of what, not in a bad way, but they just, you know, it takes away your imaginative part of the process.
Yeah, well, and even you were talking about the actors, like letting the actor like run with it in a way, so it introduces a little bit of variety to the experience, a little bit of chaos. You know, the reader can interpret in between the panels different, the actor is going to bring something different. And I think Brandon was right that animation, blah blah blah, and then a literal translation of a style like they tried to do in Sin City, to me was just like, oh.
Yeah, I enjoy it. But something I was thinking about is there's a amount of artists in heavy metal whose relationship to film is so much closer than a relationship to animation. Like a guy like Inky Bilal, you know, who does films and they're all live action, or you know, like Milo Manara, who has this like very much a relation to Fellini's work. And it feels like if and animated Manara stuff exists, and I recommend no one look it up ever.
Oh, I'm gonna look it up right now.
Is Butterscotch the animated, and it looks like it had like the He-Man budget.
Oh,
no.
On that property
I'm writing
too.
it down anyway. I want to see it.
Yeah, I want to see how bad that is.
If there's somebody who you know in your life who hates Manara, it's a good thing to send them.
I'm on the fence about him always.
What's that?
I'm on the fence about him always.
There's a lot to be on the fence about, but it's like in his best moments, he's so good that it makes me completely forgive. Like, I think he's a really great example of what the world does to artists almost, because he starts out with these, like, he's doing, you know, Chesapeake Bergman, this, like, he's trying to be Fellini in comics. And then through making a living through art, then later on he has books like WWW, which I don't know if you've seen, but it's about 3 hot girls that live in a house together and have to do something sexy on a webcam every hour on the hour. And it's just like, you started at Fellini and you ended up at, you know, Sexy Gulliver's Travels. What happened between there?
Yeah.
I mean, he's still a fantastic artist.
Do you look at, John, Guido Crepaw a lot? When I was looking at your Zentropa stuff today, I was seeing elements of that, and I wanted to ask about that.
I'm not sure. Let me look him up. How do you spell?
Well, that's a hard no.
Yeah, because maybe with the images, I probably have a book.
Oh yeah, Valentina is his big book, or I think he did with the man.
Yeah, I saw elements of the Valentina stuff when I was like re-looking at the.
Oh yeah, so it's Crepax.
Yeah, I'll pull it.
Oh yes, yeah, Crepax.
Yeah, Crepax. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm assuming.
I have his books.
Okay.
I have my Manara story about him.
Yeah, I don't know if it's I've seen it. I love it. I'm not sure if I mean, if there's anything influence, it's probably subconscious. I always, even as a kid, I felt I wish there was more structure in his drawings. They're very loosey-goosey. But I do have his books, and I like it a lot.
It was more the layouts that I saw, like the rhythmic nature of your layouts.
I'll have to take a second look at that. Yeah, well, it's there. I mean, I have the books on my shelf. So, but what I did with the layouts is I did a big giant image, and then I would zoom in and kind of crop. So I'm like panning around,
Oh,
very much like a camera. And
Yeah.
that's pretty good. So it would be that way. It would never be, you know, because I always had a difficult time drawing in a panel. It was impossible for me. So, but I can have a viewfinder, just kind of drag it around, and oh, that's kind of neat. So it's almost like found art, kind of.
It's interesting. It's a very the opposite of how I work, because if I have the panel, like sometimes I'll even just copy someone's page layout, just the boxes, and then not look at the thing again, and then fill in the boxes myself.
Yeah, I think that's great. I can't work that way.
Total. So I wonder then, does that relate back to, you said you did a lot of abstract film and you regret that, but do you think that there's some elements of like just formal compositional elements that you see like composition and abstraction into shapes like through the zooming part of it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it was just I was just too one-sided. I lived, breathed, ate, and crapped, design, composition. And and if that's all you have, then sometimes the work can come off a little cold or uninteresting. Like, oh, they'll watch it for a minute. That's great. But once you watch 5 minutes, you start nodding off. So so focusing on the other stuff, your life story and how do you just stories, stories of characters and things. But yeah, I love design. I teach film design. So we'll have a movie, let's say Gladiator is my favorite thing to look at. We'll look at the opening sequence of Gladiator. We'll freeze a frame and I'll have all the students draw it. And sometimes you'll be drawing 100 people in a shot, I'll talk about the negative, positive, and negative shapes and all the different designs that they had just for the opening sequence of Gladiator specifically, and everything Ridley Scott does, but especially Gladiator. And I just geek out.
Oh yeah, the storyboard artist in that is fantastic. I'll mispronounce his name, but it's Sylvian Dupree. Is that it?
Yeah, I've got his book too. Yes,
yeah, you look at his Gladiator drawings, and it makes the movie look bad. They're so beautiful.
Yeah, he's like a comic book. The way he does his boards, it's like a beautiful comic as well. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to look at those. It's just interesting because you two are taking such a different, like Brandon is so constructing and you're finding, it sounds like, in composition, which is really interesting to me as a dichotomy.
Yeah, I'm jealous of it. I'm like, it sounds like you figured out great ways to have fun, and I'm just sitting here trying to do math problems in art.
Well, but it seems like with your art that it doesn't feel logical. It feels like you're just joyfully. Maybe it's just my.
No, that's very true. I remember when I met Rob Liefeld. I remember one of my great disappointments. I asked him if he makes noises when he draws, and he looked at me like I was a crazy person because I can't draw an explosion without being like. I think if anyone did it, it would be Rob Liefeld, and he was like, no, I don't do that at all. And I was like, you're a fraud,
Yeah, and when you listen to him talk, like it's really hard to imagine that guy not just emoting all the time.
I think he probably does. I'd like to believe that. How can you draw a machine gun firing or whatever and not make the bullet sound? Physically impossible.
That's awesome.
I'm interested, Carson. Do you still have that issue of Heavy Metal up? Because I wanted to see what was actually in that one.
Yeah, I like the fact that we went totally off track. That was like my idea to bring everyone together and just see. It's
very Heavy Metal, isn't it?
Yeah, we can go back to that. Yeah, okay. It crashed a little bit. Okay, there we go. Corbin, how would you animate that? That would be all like.
Well, 3D. It could be 3D. You could build it in 3D.
Yeah.
And light it that way pretty easily.
Yeah, his would be good.
Like with stuff they do nowadays with Pixar, you can get a lot of squash and stretch, So the stuff that they're doing now is so sophisticated in animation that they could do this. I wouldn't mind seeing it even with the word bubbles. It's kind of because it's so rendered, and then you'd have these really graphic word bubbles and the blue skin. I don't know, but I understand what you're saying too. Maybe it should just stay as is,
Well, it does strike me as like it looks like he's trying to recreate a lot of 1970s film stuff in his work.
Right. Anyway,
it almost feels like animation's a sidestep if it's comics' relationship to film that's happening.
I to me his stuff looks more like claymation because it's so sculptured, so sculpturally formed out. Like
Yeah, it could be. It could be claymation. I mean, you could even do one, this like the head with the graphic on it, the blue guy, and just have him talking as a little test in claymation.
that bottom
Uh,
panel to me is so claymation.
It does look, and I think Corbin would actually make clay figures sometimes to paint from. There's, I think
right,
it's
for
model thing.
lighting. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, um, I think they're searching for new content, new ideas, new ways of working. They could just go through these magazines and it's just overflowing with ideas.
What a damn good first issue that you got though. Corbin out the gate, then Moebius right into some ink all. Holy cow.
Yeah, but I think I was too young to really appreciate it. If I could go back now to those and tell my younger self, I would say, little Johnny, just copy those drawings and
It's a great
copy
image
them.
of Mobius, that a naked corpse. Just
Exactly.
there you go, this guy's really
Little
figured out
Johnny.
alignment.
But I would copy them over and over again, not just once.
Yeah.
Not just look at it and say, "Oh, I wish I could draw someday," but actually, and not sketch it either. I would tell myself to draw it in direct pen,
Hmm.
and if you feel like you're not getting it, just keep drawing it over and over again rather than drawing and erasing.
Right.
I think I would have gotten a lot further. But anyway, we can't go back. That's why I have students. That's what I would tell a student if they love Mobius. I even have them. I have them drawing directly from Mobius for 10 minutes. And then they have the figure model, and I say, let's see what you remembered from Mobius when you draw the model.
Nice.
You do a lot of
Carson, can you
straight
go back
ink.
to the first or three or more pages on the Mobius thing. There's something, that middle panel there is one of the things that I think of like the most French Franco-Belgian way you can ever lay out a comic page, is that thing where it's they're walking right on the border like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then you got Tintin at the bottom of the page too.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Like adult Tintin. John, do you have them do a lot of straight to ink drawing? I do that with my students because I hate when they erase. Like, so I like to do straight to ink too.
Yeah, we're not allowed to have any erasers. Not even allowed to talk about erasers in my class.
Yeah.
Even now you could get in trouble.
Exactly. In one letter grade, every time you mention the E word.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
yeah, we always work in direct pen.
I tell them
or
like it's way
something.
easier to correct a mistake in relationship to it still being there. Like if you leave the mistake, then you know how to fix it. But if you erase it, then you're
You
going to
tend
make
to
the
make the
same
same mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and I like drawing with the fear too. You got to have, like, that was one of the things that a friend of mine would talk about, like why she didn't like doing digital art, is it took away the fear from her of like having to like do an ink line and own it, as opposed to being able to undo
Interesting.
it.
I think that's great. This is big influence right here.
Jeffrey Catherine Jones, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe the biggest. And this is what got me into figure drawing when I went to college and beyond. Because it's not really, it's more figure drawing style than comic books. And the people are natural, they're not glorified. This was my favorite, I think. Whenever I got to heavy metal, I couldn't wait to get to this page when he had his image, and then he had the other one, Mirage, I think it was called. Yeah.
Oh, is that what this
stepped in
is?
something
Is
the other day.
image?
I was out eating with a bunch of friends, and I mentioned that work wasn't well written, and they were like, "How dare you?" And I was like, "It's beautiful art, but the story just seems like, fridge magnet sometimes to me."
Yeah, it seemed like just a reason. If he didn't have the word bubbles, it wouldn't be in the magazine. So he would just make these random statements, But then it made me think, like, is there something deep in there that I'm missing? It's like, but yeah, I love this stuff. I still love it. I found the book. They have a book with a compilation of all of these, which is great.
Oh, nice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I agree. This was always one of my favorite things. I think because it was like, it was one, sometimes two pages, right? But it was always real short, and it was like a
Yeah.
poem, and it always was like that. I don't know, the moment is in the book, like all the crazy explosions and shit, and then you're just like, and then back to that. I gotta track that book down.
Yeah,
This
I
one
ran
is
out and
intense.
bought like a little crow quill pen, and it was a disaster.
Is that photo
I think, You know, where you dip the pen in the ink and you got the, I
Yeah.
guess that's the
Yeah.
type of pen he was using, the quill. I'm like,
Do you not use those?
I should, um, but it wasn't the quill; it was the drawing ability. You know, that I didn't
Yeah.
have. I could get the quill, but you know,
And this is crazy, just like intense graphite pencil work.
yeah. Even this, I was like mesmerized. I guess when high school, I was doing like rendering. Yeah, I guess we all do rendering and copying photos and stuff, but it's just so beautifully done.
Yeah. I think this is the stuff when I was younger, at least, that I would be like, I got to be able to draw that good.
Okay, so that was your focus was this stuff right here, like the
Well, I just
rendering.
think it was like the challenge, the competition of it seemed
Mm,
like I didn't realize necessarily some of the other stuff, that how it's actually more challenging and more sophisticated.
interesting. That's cool. Just this alone, you see all the different styles in one magazine.
That's a fancy
Uh,
pig.
It's
that's
a
a
fancy
wordless
pig
pig.
mistress too.
Oh yeah. It doesn't quite sound like a compliment. Like, what a fancy pig mistress.
That's a new insult.
Yeah.
You're a
Yeah,
fancy pig mistress, and then a snail out of nowhere. I think
random.
that's the other thing that I appreciated about heavy metal, is like really opening me up to uh comics having different, like, that you could make it with a lot of different mediums. It didn't have to be pen and ink and flat colors. And um
Yeah, the
I always
70s
go,
stuff was very risky. I think my favorite area of heavy metal might even be the later stuff when they started publishing entire French graphic novels in the 90s, when they'd have like Waters of Dead Moon in there and you could get the whole thing for $5 or whatever. But this has so much weird stuff in it.
Yeah, this sometimes you'd have to wait for the next issue, or you have to be 10 issues long to see a story, you know. Um, yeah, this is actually, I don't, just seeing it again, it's pretty cool, you know. I mean, to have this around for a young artist to be inspired by, to say, you know, you have the freedom of expression, you can do whatever you want, you can show whatever you want, but then you can also express it in different styles, different mediums. It's a pretty cool magazine. You know?
I always vacillate between, like, if I like the painted art or not. I guess some of it's depending on who's doing it and whether there's line work involved or not. If that help, like, this has linear elements to it. I always go back and forth on that in comics, but I think I always land back mostly on line heavy stuff works better
Hmm.
in comics. Like Corbin never landed for me. It was too rendered.
Like this one.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was a Bizarre Sex cover it got used for as well.
The what?
Oh, I think this got used for a copy of the, like, I think it was called Bizarre Sex or something like that. It was a, kind of a head shop comic.
yeah, I remember that one too.
Probably shouldn't leave these on screen for too long. But yeah, stuff like this, I don't know why it doesn't read to me as well. Here's some.
With Corbin, I think the stories really, really click with me because it does feel like he's doing these really singular B movie style plots that feel really personal.
Hmm. Yeah, I think for myself, I did like it, but I always gravitated towards the line for some reason. Even though I was fascinated by the technique with this, when it was all said and done, it always it just got back to the singular linear type of stuff.
Yeah, it's never even occurred to me to emulate any art from Corbin, which is interesting because I do enjoy it a lot. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it's not what I do.
Yeah.
I view like each panel more as a single image when it's like this, because it is like, okay, I just went and painted this painting off on its own piece of canvas and then shrunk it down into a panel. And something about that always slowed or hindered my reading experience, I think. I mean, even these, not as much, but I was always impressed by this type of stuff. Or maybe I was too impressed and it slowed me down. I'm not sure.
I think if the magazine was all linear, it wouldn't have the same impact. You
Yeah.
know, to have the heavy and then the light. I think it has a nice balance. You know, for sure.
Oh, was that early? What's the name? Schutzen? Is that his name?
Oh,
No.
yeah. I don't know how to pronounce it. Skoiten. Yeah, he's really good. All the Cities of the Fantastic stuff, right? Is what he went
Right,
on
yeah.
to. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, he seems like kind of an architect that moved into comics, or somebody who's like amazing at architecture. So it's interesting
Yeah,
to see this and have less focus on the buildings in his other work, or his
and the
later work.
bearded lady.
There's
Yeah.
Jesus.
Hmm.
Uh, Jesus with breasts.
Sure.
A
My
way
Jesus has
better
breasts.
version. And the crotch guns.
Oh yeah, that's important. It's a great shadow panel.
When I was first flicking through this, like some of the faces and stuff too, I thought, what is this really early Manara? Yeah, it's interesting to see this guy got a lot better at figures as he went.
Yeah, it definitely seems like early work of someone who's fantastic. I had that same thought with the earlier painted stuff with the fancy pig. Is it just it had this like enthusiasm of somebody who like doesn't know when to pull back a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that's the cool thing about a lot of the heavy metal too, is like, I mean, even by this page, it's way better. Um, like some of that enthusiasm that people iron out as they go. Like I like bands too. A lot of bands, I like their first couple records, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, we're really focusing on songwriting more and like being better at our craft. I'm like, no, but your stuff sounds like everyone else now. It's like when it was unstructured and all over the place that I like it.
Yeah, and Zora was one of my favorites too. I forgot about that. Like a Barbarella style. Yes.
And some really impressive like design, page totalized page design. And here the painting works for me for some reason. I think because of the heavy design elements, maybe.
I think we
Mm-hmm.
can all agree that this artist does drugs.
I don't know.
I bet you they don't. Like everyone assumes that you're on drugs all the time too, Brandon.
That's true. I've been trying to catch up lately, but
And probably John's work too.
but yeah, for years that would always bother me. Yeah, it's weird because there is an iconography of drug culture, and I always like the iconography more than I like the drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was influenced a lot by heavy, like 1960s psychedelic art, which is all influenced by drugs, but I don't do any drugs. I
Yeah.
like the art.
There's an irony in sitting around and just soberly watching Cheech and Chong movies. Like, this is brilliant. I wonder how they came up with this.
Although this
Yes.
was made in what, 76, so maybe.
Oh yeah,
But
since the
man,
year I
like
was born.
some of this is beautiful stuff.
But there was talk about, I think Robert Rodriguez was going to redo Barbarella.
Oh yeah, that would have been fascinating. I like his movies a lot. So normally I'm a huge, I don't enjoy remakes, but I feel like I'd want to see that from him.
I think Barbarella could be remade. It's like,
Yeah. And
Yeah,
he'd be the guy to
there's
do it.
room for improvement in Barbarella.
I think you're right. Speaking of Manara again, though, he did a Barbarella short story that was really fascinating, where he took Forrest's original panel. Like, there's a specific panel of Barbarella lying in bed with a robot, and he redrew it. And it was really cool to see those two artists, like what he changed in his own drawings.
That's cool. That's great.
And there's also
This-
online, if you look up Manara Barbarella, he did designs for a movie that never happened too. That are really fascinating to see.
Oh, that's too bad. Kazaa was in the first issue I ever saw, one of the 90s ones. They had a Felipe Kazaa piece, and he still takes me places.
Oh yeah, he worked in some really good animated movies. He did a thing called Gandahar or Light Years that he had designs for. It's worth looking up. It's kind of more heavy metal than the heavy metal movie, I think.
Yeah, he's like when I think of heavy metal, probably just because he's one of my first, but to me, this is like when I say the spirit of heavy metal that you two both capture, he's got that thing too.
I like that his name sounds like a wizard spell.
Huzzah. It's too bad. There's another. Oh, that's Pratt. That's not Jones. Hugo Pratt,
nice.
probably. Or not Hugo Pratt, George Pratt.
George Pratt. He was at my
George Pratt.
school. I think when I was in school, he was a year ahead of me, or 2 years ahead of me.
Really? He
George
teaches down at Savannah, right? He's at SCAD, I think.
I believe so.
Is this Unky Billall?
Yeah, I think so. Real early stuff.
I see. I like his early stuff better too. I don't like when he switched over to like pastels and all of that. Like I like his intense cross-hatching stuff.
He's definitely more Mobius back then.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
probably why I like it. Bias.
I like the
This is-
midpoint. I really like when he was doing like the woman trap, and there's one where a guy who's a memory specialist and he keeps like trying to remember back to the moment he was born. That one's really fascinating.
Read that. And then Droulet. How do you
But yeah,
pronounce
that cross hatching
the-
hurts my hand.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know me. I love the cross hatching. How does this name pronounce?
I don't know.
I just
I
say
ca-
Droulet. I mispronounce everything.
Yeah, I
Droulet.
pronounce it differently every year. But
Yeah.
yeah, he
He's
has
an
a
artist
few
I've never
books
been able to connect with his writing, but his art is so fantastic. Like I constantly am looking at his drawings and I couldn't tell you what a single story he wrote was about.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say I need to go back and revisit him because I remember not being able to read the stuff and being like, this looks really cool, but I can't focus on it. And so like I've been wondering if I just need to go back and revisit it, but maybe it is just
I should try too, because maybe my 15-year-old brain wasn't up for it.
that's kind of what I'm wondering because the art is so lovely. Maybe, yeah, maybe the art's just there to be appreciated, but that's
He
my
did an
memory
interesting
of it.
story where he mixed, he brought in a model and did like mixed photographs in with his comic pages. It looked really interesting.
Yeah, I remember that one. Like it would turn or give her like pink skin, I think. Yeah.
Like a photocopy look,
Mhm.
colored over.
I love that page too with the collage, like that one right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The way all the different worlds that I don't know. That is how I picture a heavy metal movie. You know, like not the poster, but the
Sure.
imagery, if it was ever done. I guess I just like the mixture of styles, and sometimes that can be people might be put off by that. There's a movie, Cool World,
Yeah.
where he did, or Ralph actually did a mixture of styles within the frame. He'll have like a live action character and a goofy cartoon character, and a live action background, and all this stuff mixed all into the same frame. And I love it. I just love that way of working.
So you don't necessarily want like a Moebius section and then it's not a bunch of short stories in a consistent
Well,
style. You kind of want them all to intermix a little bit.
Well, I'm not sure about. It would be great. Like there could be a moment where the stories kind of interconnect. But if it was a heavy metal movie where the shorts are very short, like it could be a Corbin short that's like 30 seconds, or so it doesn't have to fill up these big giant chunks. Where you can do something that's really experimental. And really even take the artwork further.
That reminds me, maybe I've seen J.H. Williams is putting out a book right now that where he draws every different character in a different art style. It reminds me of what that might look like.
Yeah, he's a savage.
I'm writing that down right now. I'll look it up.
It's called
Yeah, and it's all printed
Echolands.
landscape format too, so it's like sideways comics.
That's cool.
And he did that on the Sandman overture too.
Mhm.
That he did with Neil Gaiman. They're like every character's in a different style. That guy is so like screw that guy for how good he is.
Yeah,
'Cause
JH is a menace. He doesn't use photo reference either.
yeah, it's insane. And it like he knows exactly how to draw any style that he's seen. It's like that can just come out of his hand like its own. It's really it's really frustrating to look at his stuff.
This is one that I always associate with old heavy metal that always confused me because it has all these like celebrities that show up in it.
Mm-hmm.
The Beatles, I think, are in it at some point.
Yep.
See, this is one I probably would have skipped over reading. It's another thing I could never read Mad Magazine and ones like this where all of the word balloons are square. I don't know why. And the typing, like that it's typed with uppercase and lowercase, that always like was a real barrier to me for these stories. Who is this by? Rod Kierkegaard.
I don't know much about him past heavy metal.
And this one, I love this. I want to buy the collections of these. This was one of my favorite. The Bus. Yeah. Paul Kirchner. They have books of those. I just found out.
Oh, really?
I read an interview with him recently.
Say that again.
Oh, I just read an interview with him recently, and he talked a lot about the difficulty of coming up with these constantly.
I bet. Has he done other stuff? What else did they talk about in the interview?
It was mostly the bus. I think it was an older interview.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I loved about them. But besides the like impeccable drawing, it's such a strange thing to then give yourself the task of coming up with a new one every month.
You were talking about Lynch earlier. David Lynch earlier. He did a comic called "The Angriest Dog in the World" that I think ran for 9 years, and
What?
every issue of it, it ran in a newspaper, and every strip of it is just a dog angrily pulling at his leash as hard as he can while people in a house say things that would make the dog angry.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I've read about it, but it's just ideas. Like the artwork is all the same. It's just the one shot of the angry dog, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd get much out of actually seeing it because it is that.
Or reading it, you have to read it. Actually.
Yeah, it is very much like what's interesting to me about it is that David Lynch made a comic more than what it actually is.
Yeah, I wonder if they published that.
I think it was in Raw magazine, if I'm remembering right.
Okay, because I'd be interested to have like a whole book of just David Lynch's angst about the world, I guess.
Yeah.
9 years worth of just angst filtered through a dog. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, very Lynch.
So it was written that he started hand lettering it, I think, and then he would just call them on the phone sometimes and just be like, here's what it says, and that you guys put it in, but he didn't like it as much. So at the end he came back and hand lettered it. And eventually the editor was like he was just doing it forever, and the editor was like, okay, I think this has run its course.
But it was like 9 years?
Yeah, if I'm remembering right.
Was it like a weekly, or was it just when he felt like it?
I assume it was weekly or monthly. That would be insane if it was daily for 9 years.
Although it's just a pretty angry dog.
Oh yeah, are you guys familiar with Kelly Green?
Yes.
No, I haven't. It's beautiful.
This one's fantastic. It's the guy who was the head writer, Leonard Starr, was the head writer on Thundercats for the whole of it. And Stan Drake, who I think he took over Dagwood and Blondie and run it for his entire life. He would do daily Dagwood strips, and then he would draw these like beautiful almost photorealistic Kelly Green comics that were just published in Europe.
Well, Leonard Starr was those two are like major figures in Strange Death, so I had to look at them a lot. Stan Drake being the one guy that just scared the shit out of me. I was like, oh man, when Dave asked me to draw like Stan Drake, I'm not going to be able to do it because he's such a savage. But Leonard Starr did Mary Perkins on Stage, the comic strip, and that's amazing. Really great comics, literate. And then he did Little Orphan Annie as well on the side.
Yeah, he kind of revived Little Orphan Annie. And the thing that I think I learned probably from reading Strange Death is that Stan Drake had his ears ripped off in the car crash. No,
he didn't. That was that
They mentioned it in this, I think, and I was just like, oh, Jesus.
Oh, did they? Because that has the episode where they go to Comic-Con, right?
Yeah, and Will Eisner and Neil Adams show up.
Yeah, but Stan Drake did Heart of Juliet Jones, which is way better than what he did on Dagwood. He was just doing them both at the same time.
It's more amazing that he was able to do that, because you look at the Dagwood stuff and it just looks like, or the Little Orphan Annie stuff where they're so cartoony and they just did them like continuously, and then you look at what they're capable of. Like both Drake and Starr being fantastic illustrators.
Oh, the best. And to see Stan Drake cut loose in the European market, where he's not bound to the a nice family in 1950 America, like trying to find a husband. It's pretty...
I think my point of bringing this up was just that they managed to do these kind of daily strips while going off and doing other stuff, and I guess it kind of goes back to John's idea of how you manage your time, and I'm just kind of amazed that people, I just had to push I'm starting a new comic now, and I just had to basically like get every other job out of the way so I didn't even have to think about him.
Right. Well, even Mobius, he had two names, right? He was two artists.
Oh yeah.
He was Jean Girard, and he was also Mobius. So he was doing twice as much work, simply by making himself a new name. So
yeah,
that's the easy way. Just duplicate yourself, and you'll be fine. Twice as much work.
Just be Mobius. It's fine. You're good.
Yeah.
Just do that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easy peasy.
No problem.
I'll definitely be thinking about that a lot, because I think I've let that go in my life a little bit. And so I appreciate, John, that you're like making me reconsider how to expand time again. Like you're saying for exercise, I've let that go in the last year, and that's been a real bummer. So I got to wrap it up because we have family that came. That's why the dogs were barking earlier. But tell us about the Kickstarter. What's that? And then like how's that feed into the movie and all, like prompt that for us.
Sure. Yeah, it's I guess I can't really show it because it's all, secretive stuff, but it's going to be like backpacks and bags and clothing, all with this Entropa artwork on it. And we've got the proofs. It looks amazing. Pillows and all that type of stuff. So hopefully the idea is the Kickstarter hopefully will be great. But when we pitch the film, we'll say, here are the things that are around the film that are already successful: the clothing, the backpacks, the bags, the comic book, the graphic novel, the toys, or the statues. So we have all that stuff because when you're pitching a film, if it's new, if it's not Iron Man 7, people don't care. Understandably, because it's a new product. How are we going to? You need to have a fan base before you even darken the door of some studio. So you have to have data. So, but anyway, besides that, I think it's really cool. I can't wait to launch this thing. I'm going to start kind of like giving people a little bit of clues and stuff. But I think the audience for this is going to be like the Comic-Con type of people. Like, what kind of bags would you want to carry around? How do you want to dress and stuff like that? Yeah. So it's going to be crazy.
Will the comic and the graphic novel be back out? Because like I want to get that. Like I know there's more of it than was in Heavy Metal, and I've looked online and it's out of print, and so it's like $90-100 to get a copy. Are you reprinting that as part of this?
I don't know.
Oh, you break my heart.
I think with the movie, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, we sold out of it. Which was great. But to do a whole new thing and to sell out again, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would love to
just take it to a publisher and throwing them the files and be like, you guys deal with that.
I don't know if I buy into that. The publisher makes 99% of the profit, and we get the pennies. Here you go.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk off thing if you want, because I know some people.
Okay, we'll talk. But thank you for asking. We're probably going to have the little mini comic almost like a giveaway now.
Okay.
But the larger one, if I ever was to bring it back out, I definitely would want to revamp some pages and all that. So yeah, in a way, I wish we had done more copies. We did 1,000. Maybe we should have done 1,500, but I didn't think. I had people, my family, say this is never going to sell. This is a wordless comic. There's no story, and so I had them all shrink wrapped in case none of them sold. I can keep it in my garage for like years, and they wouldn't be eaten by bugs. But then it was sold, so I was very pleasantly surprised.
And that was pre it getting into Heavy Metal.
Well, yeah, that was like a year at least before Heavy Metal. So
and did Heavy Metal ramp the interest up? Because like that's where I found it from.
I don't know. I hope that it did. I don't know. I really don't know.
That's where I discovered your work too.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
I bet you could sell another. I bet you could sell another couple thousand copies now that people are more aware of what it was, and they could have it all collected in one thing.
Oh yeah, easily.
Yeah, well, I think so.
I just have the Heavy Metal.
But I would like, if I did, it would be cool at the last pages to have storyboards from the film or a little indication of where, and where this thing is going. That could be cool.
Yeah, and I think that's like a marketing tie-in too. I don't know. That's just me selfishly wanting a really nice copy of the book.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to show you guys the book sometime off camera. I have a book of the film. It's another big hardcover book of all the production design and stuff like that. So
people would pay for that too, for sure. 100%. You got a bunch of books like that all around. People want that from you for sure.
Well, thank you. So,
All right, so we'll go do that then. We'll go off camera, and Brandon can make some recommendations, and you can show us the book. John, thanks so much for your time, man. I've been really looking forward to talking to you. Been stalking you on Instagram for a minute, and just everything you do, I'm a huge fan of. So it's been a
well,
pleasure
thank
talking.
you.
And
Absolutely.
Brandon, always a pleasure to have you on, dude. Thanks for
Oh,
jumping
yeah,
in.
yeah, it's been a good talk.
Yeah, and thank you all for following along. Catch you later.